Welcome back, press fans. Coming to you from Altman Studios in downtown Brentwood to your ears wherever you are. This is Clocked In with the Press. As always, I'm Jake Menez. My guest this week is someone who has been a part of the podcast before, every episode in fact. Today we're sitting down with the Clocked In producer and owner of Altman Studios, the man, the myth, the legend, Brian Altman. Brian, how you doing?
I'm good, Jake. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you. But before we get into it, let's hear a quick word from today's sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at the Lucas Group, an independently owned and operated real estate company in Brentwood. The Lucas Group specializes in all aspects of real estate, working with both buyers and sellers to meet their home ownership needs. Give them a call today at 925-392-8926.
Thanks once again to today's sponsor. So Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long has Altman Studios been around?
Well, I first started taking clients in my home studio in 2015, and I opened this location. I started demo on it on January 2nd of 2021, and we took our first client, I believe it was April 16th of 2021. So we completed construction pretty quickly, and my business has gone through a lot of changes over the last 7 years, buddy.
And so part of that, of course, you're talking about clients. Most of your clients are musicians rather than podcasters.
Well, in the beginning, it was only musicians. Yeah, it was all music. But it has become a mix of like business services and music because I do voiceover as well.
So let's zoom out a little bit further then. So it's 2016, 2015. You're in your home studio, and you're taking on musicians. What is your music experience at that point?
Well, I started playing guitar in 1998 at the age of 14, and now I'm very old.
Let's try to do the math here.
Don't do the math. So I've been playing guitar for a very long time. I started off writing all the time. I was just always writing. I wanted to release my own music, and I had a great interest in the production cycle and creating great music through the recording medium. Making records has been my dream for a long time, but it's not just making records. It's making incredible records. I'm really not interested in churning it out like fast food. That doesn't sound fun to me. That's not the way I want to operate my business. So my goal has always been to make something special that really lasts. I didn't really enter music as a profession for a long time, though. I got married young, had kids very young. I was married at 21. My daughter was born when I was 23, and I'm going to be 38 next month. So
you're living the rock star lifestyle without actually being a musician at the time.
Not really. Yeah, yeah. Marriage with kids and being home all the time. Rock star central.
Every rock star has a stable family life. Everybody knows this.
Clearly. Yeah. No, I was a telecom engineer for a long time. I did software design. I was a project manager. I worked as a business intelligence analyst. I've had a very bizarre career. Somehow I did all these jobs. I never went to college, and I think I did a good job. They seemed to like what I was doing, but I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I created a 5-year plan to build a studio, develop my skills to the point where I could operate as a professional, collect all of the gear that I needed to operate as a professional. Surprise, surprise, that's a never-ending cycle. You think you ever stop buying gear? You never stop buying gear.
I'm looking around.
I buy gear nonstop.
So do you remember a particular moment? So you're sitting there, you're a telecom engineer, you're doing all these other things, and there's a moment where you decide, I have to get out of this. I want to go back to doing music and make it, a career. Do you remember the moment that happened for you?
It's a bittersweet story, but I will tell it. After my divorce back in 2013, I was working as a telecom engineer, and I mainly took that job to provide for my family. I was very happy to just provide for my family. That's the life I wanted to live. I was stoked about it, but I no longer had the family in that same iteration. I kind of had to redefine myself as people who go through divorces do. And I realized that I'd stepped away from my original dream. Growing up, I hadn't really pursued it because I didn't feel the need to anymore. But at that point, I realized now that I'm on my own again, this is what I really want. Music is what makes me feel fulfilled. It's the through line that's been consistent for my whole life. And operating a studio gives me flexibility to not just work on my music, but work on music with other people. And it's a career. It is a career that allows me to be in one place and stable, but also generate an income. And there's a lot of different things that you can do with a recording studio. So that was it. I said, this is the direction I want to go. That was back in 2013.
And what was that 5-year plan at that time look like? How did you map it? Well, first off, how did you figure out how to map that out? And second off, what did it look like?
Yeah. Well, the 5-year plan came, a couple of years later as I started, building the foundation, And what I realized is, 1, I needed to get out of debt. 2, I needed to have some money in the bank. 3, I needed to have some clientele. Once I had all of those things, I hit a place in my professional career at the business I was working at before. I was working as a business intelligence analyst in a finance department. And obviously, I'm not trained in finance. I kind of ended up in this position through happenstance. And they came to me and they said, hey, you're doing a great job, but there's a lot we need you to do beyond this. And without the proper training, you won't be able to do it, which is very fair. I don't hold anything against them for this. As a matter of fact, that place treated me great. I want to make sure that that's very clear. They were amazing to me. They actually offered to pay for me to go to college, to finance school. And I had a clientele as a recording studio in my home studio at the time. This was back in 2019. And I realized it was at that time where it was like, okay, I had all my debt paid off. I had money in the bank. I had clientele. And I hit this fork in the road where it was like, either I'm going to have to do this job and go to school, and the studio is not going to happen. I can't do that. And on top of being a dad and trying to have a life. Or I can just pour into the studio and just go full time with it. And I don't feel like I was, even though I had all those things in place, I still don't feel like I was entirely ready to do it. But I did it because I hit this fork in the road and I realized that other decision, it just wasn't going to work. I'm not going to finance school,
Sure.
I wouldn't have succeeded. I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I would have been miserable. And I would have had to stop doing this thing that I enjoyed. So.
Yeah, you wouldn't have been Brian in that role.
Yeah, I would have been Brian.
Okay, so it's 2019. You're kind of working with that. You're working with that in net now. You've made the jump to you're going to be a recording guy. So how did you transition from being the guy playing the guitar to being the guy now recording the guitar? How did you pick up the skills associated with knowing that?
I read a lot of books. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, which sounds kind of lame, but you take the good where it is, and you discard the bad. You get good at that filter. I took some online courses. I gathered information where I could. School is not really my thing, but education and school aren't like the exact same thing. I am capable of learning. I just don't like the school environment. I'm not going to go to school. It's just not my thing. It moves too slow. So I at my own pace, I picked up information here and there, tested it out, got familiar with the terminology, with the functions, and I got good at it. People seem to like what I do. So
Well, I want to hit on that in a different way, actually. So, we're talking about a big part of not just with the recording, but just kind of you in general is you're very self-taught at a lot of these things. You're saying that you were doing these other jobs without necessarily the degree you would typically associate with them. So that's kind of your whole life is you're a very self-taught guy.
That's been the way I've been operating my whole life somehow. Yeah. So how did I do that? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say part of it is a little bit of, I like to call it opportunity luck, right? You prepare yourself in such a way that when an opportunity comes your way, you can take advantage of it, right? And you don't get to control when that opportunity comes, but you put yourself in a position that you can ride that wave when it does. So when you don't have any fundamental skills, specific to a particular opportunity, what you can bring to the table is a good attitude. You can bring a strong work ethic, a commitment to excellence, and a willingness to operate as a team player and to take a leadership role. And these are things that come very naturally to me. So when I first came to the Bay Area, I had picked up a job as an engineering contractor in telecom. And because of my work ethic, I worked so hard, I eventually earned myself a job at AT&T and sort of backdoored into this engineering department where you normally have to take this like engineering test and stuff. And I never took that test. I heard it's really hard. I'm very glad I never had to take it. I probably wouldn't have passed.
Imagine if you'd end up as a lawyer doing the same thing.
I know,
Just
right?
skip the bar, you're suddenly defending.
It sounds like a really stupid sitcom or something, but
Oh, man.
there are some, obviously there's a lot of positions, a lot of jobs in this world where you have to go to school, and I would never say, hey, they should change that. If you're a doctor, going to school, probably a good thing. I don't think I should be like backdooring my way into, doctorhood or something.
Oh,
you know what I
man,
mean?
they're putting you under, and you see the doctor pull out the book, How to Operate for Dummies.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah.
But no, I think there is an interesting aspect, though, of, this dichotomy between, school and education are not always, one and the same. They can be mutually exclusive, and since you can learn, outside of a school setting if you want to, which clearly you want to.
You have to make that effort. You deliberately make that effort. You have to know what you're going after, know what you're trying to do, and go and do it. Get off your hiney and make it happen.
And as a side note, you said you came to the Bay Area. Where did you come from initially, Brian?
I grew up in San Luis Obispo.
It's not that far from your hometown here now.
Yeah, it's like 4.5, 5 hours, depending on how fast you drive.
Maybe you came from some exotic land like Milwaukee.
Yeah. I come from Atlantis.
Atlanta,
my
Georgia.
superpowers have helped me to develop this unique career. No, I just came in from San Luis Obispo. I had to move away because there's just not a lot of opportunity in San Luis Obispo. It's a very smaller kind of community. Moving up to the Bay Area, it was just like, oh, another world.
Little fish in a big pond. Yeah.
Really, San Luis Obispo doesn't even have drive-throughs. I came up here and I had to like get used to going through the drive-through. I'm not kidding.
So now you're a business owner today here in the Bay Area. What do you think is a business's role in the community? Just talking about, this community-minded element of yourself.
I have to give big credit to my cousins Aaron and Evan Steed, who are the owners of a business called Meathead Movers that's based in San Luis Obispo, and they've opened up several locations all over the state. And something that my cousin Aaron says that has always been an inspiration to me, and he recently stated it to me in a very concise way, and that's the way I'm going to say it now, which is, if a business isn't making the world better, it's not fulfilling its role. So for me, I think to myself, okay, I started off thinking, oh, I want to make records for me. But now my mind is starting to transition more to what can I do for my community, right? Like, what can I do to help the businesses around here be more successful? What can I do for young people in the community to be more inspired to pursue the arts, to pursue music, to pursue production? And that is more my focus now these days, honestly. It's like I hardly even think about making records anymore, if I'm being completely honest, because I think more about like, okay, I want to assist these businesses, these people that I care so much about who have shown such amazing support for me. I want to work with students and help them to have the skills and the motivation and the confidence to pursue that creative spark that they have inside of them, because it can be so easily beaten down and destroyed, and then often or exploited. I didn't expect this sort of development when I opened up in downtown Brentwood. I was looking for just a building. I need to open up a studio. Yeah. Let me find a building. And I found this place, and the price point was right, and the room sounded great, and they let me make all these changes in here. And so it was like, okay, cool, this works out. But then the community embraced me. People started stopping by. The mayor came by and hung out with me for a couple of hours. I became friends with the owner of the local newspaper. These things happened where I realized that being part of a community and growing the connectedness of a community is so much more important than the small goals that I had before. I love that so much more.
So it's almost, it's transformed into almost like a symbiotic relationship between you and the community.
A community is a symbiosis, right?
Yeah.
We're all trying to work together to make a beautiful place to live and to raise our children and to feel safe and to feel loved. And I want to be a part of that. I want to have a positive impact on that end goal. And I think that as a business, any business owner, that's powerful, and I have to thank my cousins for inspiring me in that way, especially because of the way that they operate their businesses. Look up Meathead Movers and see what they do for victims of domestic violence. They're incredible.
So let's turn it around a little bit then. So, the community has embraced you. Is that's their half of their symbiotic relationship? But I know there's ways in which you're also reaching out and helping with the community, such as like student mentorships. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's in the beginning stages, but what I would like to do is, again, I have this incredible resource of this studio here, and I have a very broad skill set that not just in music, but also in business and I think in life. Even though I'm not perfect, or nor have I overcome all issues or anything like that, but I think I've got a pretty good head on my shoulders for life, and I feel that my broad array of skills can be just a powerful force in the life of a young person. In this world, we need more people who step up and do things like that. And I don't want to come out and say, well, I am qualified to do all the great, and like I am great man and I'm going to do great things. But we have to step up and put ourselves in positions to try. And that's what I want to do. I think, I grew up, I was struggling when I was a kid. I had a hard time. I had anger issues. I had a weird family. I'm not the only person like that. There's a lot of people out there like that. And it's the good people who came into my life that helped me to step beyond that anger, the difficulties, the challenges that were, forced on me as a young person. And the best thing I can do is just pay that forward. And I want to pay that forward. So
you're not just looking to give, when I was 9, I had a teacher who I took piano lessons from, just read the sheet music, go home and practice. That was the extent of the relationship there. You're looking for it to be an actual crash course on life, essentially.
Music is any sort of discipline requires more than just the activity, right? So, like if you're learning guitar, for example, you can, you have to learn to play the instrument. You've got to learn to read some sort of way of communicating music but then you also need the discipline to continue, the discipline to not give up, the right attitude to be able to work with others, and the right attitude to not ruin it for yourself. A lot of times you start playing music, a lot of people who start playing music, they want to express themselves. They have this thing that they want to get out, and it's difficult, it's hard, and they beat themselves up. And there's a skill in not like giving up, So there's a lot. It's impossible to separate the two in my mind. Like it seems like they're like one thing.
For those of you listening, Brian and I are going to take a short break. But when we get back, we're going to take a really deep dive into the pros and cons of a career in music and look at what makes a good podcast. So stick around.
Today's sponsor, the Lucas Group, has been in business since 2005 and is now offering clients the most cutting-edge solutions in property technology through HomeLight's suite of products and services. Simple sales, trade-ins, and cash offers. For simple sales, the Lucas Group makes selling your home easy. Sell when you're ready without the hassle of paying for repairs, prepping for listing, or dealing with showings. Receive a competitive, no-obligation cash offer, typically within 48 hours. Close in as little as 10 days. If you would like to avoid the stress, risk, and hassle of buying and selling at the same time, the Lucas Group can help with a trade-in, a calmer, more certain alternative to real estate. They will buy your current home, giving you the freedom to buy your new home. And if your current home sells for more than the price of your new home, the Lucas Group pays you the difference, minus the selling costs. If you want to triple your winning potential, the Lucas Group has a cash offer program. The Lucas Group will help you make the strongest offer possible with a 21-day close for free. That means no program or lender fees. Call the Lucas Group's award-winning agents today at 925-392-8926.
Thanks once again to today's sponsor. Let's jump back in. So Brian, you're a music guy, you're recording musicians, and now today you're doing podcasts as well. Where did that begin?
Yeah, it was interesting. I started forming this relationship with Greg Robinson, the owner of the press, the local press. And
I've heard of him.
you may know this fella. The social media director at the press at the time, Caitlin, who many of you listeners may remember, she came to Greg with an idea to start a podcast for the newspaper as another way of getting information out to the community. And serendipitously, Greg and I had just started forming this relationship. I have this recording studio with all of this equipment and the skills to do post-production on podcasts. I had a show before in my home studio called The Day Job. And it was fun to do. It was a lot to do by myself. And I have equipment now that could allow me to do that far more efficiently. I could probably start it up again maybe, but I just have so much other stuff going on. So I'm probably not going to do that. But
I know the feeling.
So working on that show before allowed me to understand like the production cycle of creating a podcast / show. And that had a video component to it, which, we may or may not be adding to this show at some point.
Mysterious, very mysterious.
And also, obviously, in the process of creating that show, I picked up all the equipment I needed to create it. So serendipitously, I met Greg at the same time that one of his employees was trying to get this started, and he said, hey, you want to help us get this going? I said, sure. So we started putting it together, and this is episode 80 that we're recording right now. And I remember episode 1, it was rough. Now we get to episode 80, it's moving like a finely oiled machine. And so what I realized in the course of creating the podcast is one, this is going to sound a little bit selfish, but this is a business, and other businesses have budgets, and generally other businesses have decent budgets, and so and consistent budgets. And as a business, I have to go after big fish like that can provide a consistent revenue source. And a lot of times musicians or rappers, they will come in one at a time every once in a while, drop $100 or, $200 or something on a couple of hours. And then I don't see them for a couple of months. You can't build a business on that. It's too sporadic. I'm focused on creating consistency. I like consistency. makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Pays your bills.
Yeah, the bills get paid. I'm not freaking out. Yeah, that's nice. And then on top of that, I realized that making podcasts is really fun. I actually really love doing this. It's a lot of fun.
There's a reason we're still doing it 80 episodes in.
Totally. Yeah. I probably went way beyond the scope of your question there, but that's how it happened.
Walk us through your process. You're doing an episode of the Presses podcast that we're listening to right now. So once you and I finish recording this, what's the next step for you? If I were a listener, how would I know, how the hot dog is made? How the sausage is made? I learned recently that I was saying that wrong.
Yeah. So how the hamburger is made. Well, it's the episode is being recorded as we speak.
Literally.
Once we're finished, I will go and sit down at my computer. I have templates built for all of the processing of the recordings. Equalization, compression, noise gates, limiting, all these words that most people listening will have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to explain it because everybody's eyes are going to glaze over. But I have built templates to sort of pre-process all of this stuff in advance to make my job a lot faster. But there are things that need to be added after the fact, such as music, transition sounds, the recordings of the ads that we run on these episodes. So I add those into the recording file. I remove dead space, which I assure the listener there has been much of during this episode even. You will not hear it, but it was there. It's the dumb things that we've said to each other that are not going to end up in the final recording. All that gets removed. I am the stopgap. And uhs, I'm sure some of those will end up here in the final recording, but I try to remove as many of those as I can without making the recording sound weird. People can often find themselves repeating things when you're explaining something because you're trying to find the words to say, right? And you don't want dead space, and this is the way that we operate in a conversation. And so we can get really excited when we start saying things really fast, when you take a breath and and then you start repeating yourself. And these things happen in every podcast because that's just the way we operate. And speaking at this more regulated tone where you're measuring your words very carefully, it's a discipline that's very difficult. So a lot of those accidentals, I call them accidentals, I remove all that stuff in the recording process. On top of that, I'm creating cover art for the podcast for the YouTube version of these episodes. We release an audio only version with a YouTube cover art, and I create that, and I create the video file and pop that out there for you guys. Create a set of show notes that basically say this is the timestamps of all these different events in the podcast episode and what that timestamp represents.
Yeah, it's exciting, for people to hear, people that see the finished product to hear how much of it, you're involved in, which is clearly pretty much all of it.
I do all the things except for the talent.
I wouldn't go that far. So let's. And a big part of your gig, a big part of your role is quality control. So these episodes, obviously, when we're talking, we go much longer than what the finished product is. So my question is two parts. One, what, in your opinion, Brian, makes for a good podcast episode? And number two, what that we say, what are some examples of things that you would cut out that don't add to that episode?
Yeah, these are great questions. So the first question, what makes a great podcast episode? I think that there's two very important components that have to be in every podcast episode for it to be interesting. One, charisma. People behind the mic, you could be talking about paint drying with great charisma and with bombast, and you can make that sound exciting somehow because charisma is this powerful magnetic force. And then also, if you pair that with an interesting subject matter, something of value. Now, obviously, of all the 7 billion people on the planet, you are going to have a very hard time creating something that is interesting to 7 billion people, right? It's going to be targeted, and that's fine. It's not going to be for everybody. That's okay. But something new, novel, special, insightful, a different perspective, even on old information. Bringing something new to the table, that is a powerful force to bring to a podcast. But you've got to do it with charisma, because seriously, you could talk about paint drying with great charisma, and it'll be hilarious and easy to listen to. You'll get listeners. You could talk about interdimensional space travel at the most boring tone and speed, and you will get 0 listens because nobody wants to hear that.
That's why I don't think Ben Stein has a podcast, does he?
I haven't looked, but it would be curious to see. But this is why, the science leaders are like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye, these guys with like huge personalities and great charisma, because they can take these very difficult subjects and complicated subjects and turn it into something that's incredibly interesting. They can, because of their great charisma and communication skills. So that is what makes an interesting podcast episode. And something I want to make very clear for anybody who's interested in starting a podcast, it doesn't matter if what you want to say has been said before, because it's never been you saying it. Right? You have a very unique perspective and a very unique way of bringing whatever you're doing, whatever you're interested in, to the table. Nobody else can do that the way that you do it. So you're always going to be adding something of value to the marketplace. Just do it with great charisma and do it with honesty and integrity. You will bring something special to the marketplace. So that's it. What was the second question, Jake?
Well, the second half of the question was, how in the process an episode might end up longer than what needs to be. So how do you determine what should be cut out to make that good episode of a podcast? So a lot of it is my voice.
Yeah. So I try to make you as like small a piece of. I'm just kidding, Jake. I love you, buddy. You see how I just said I will leave that in. It just happens because you're trying to fill this empty space. It's such a discipline to try and develop yourself to stop doing that. Anyways, for each show, there are different, I would say, rules and goals for the show. So for this is meant to be a news podcast, right? So if we're recording a news and sports episode and the hosts start sharing a lot of their opinions, while I personally I love people having differing opinions, and I'm like happy to be friends with people with lots of different opinions, very contrasting opinions, and I take a very center place for a lot of things, and I am not a censor. I want everybody to be able to say what they want to say, but for a news organization, me personally, I think, okay, this is not supposed to be a place where a lot of opinions are shared. This is where facts are shared, right? So I'm very careful about the opinion type commentary that I let through. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's just the approach that I take. Also, when just like I was saying earlier, when things start getting repeated, or if in the process of creating the episode, you guys are trying to have some banter and add something, but it kind of just doesn't hit. It happens. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good to try. I have zero criticism for effort. It's the lack of effort that I will criticize. Effort's great, even if you miss. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it does miss, I'm not going to leave it in there because it's not interesting. It doesn't add. It needs to add. So like if something happens with the delta and their blue-green algae in the water in Discovery Bay, which we keep talking about, right? And we just say, well, blue-green algae, that's a bad thing. We don't like those bad things. You know what? I'm not going to let that through because it doesn't add anything. It doesn't do anything. Like, obviously, we don't like bad things. But if you call back to, well, we had this same issue, a year ago, and this is how we handled it. Well, now you're adding to the story, right? So these are, does that help? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, I mean, for a listener, to summarize it, it's really just what adds value to the overall conversation.
You got it.
So in what way does your experience recording music inform your experience recording podcasts? Is there any sort of crossover at all, or are they two totally separate skill sets?
I mean, the technology obviously is the same. Also, the ability to process recordings in a way that is pleasant to the ear, that's a skill that crosses over. And having a location to be able to do that in is also quite useful. And creativity in general is a crossover skill, right? If you're creative in one way, you can tend to have a little bit of creative skill in many ways. But, music, obviously, music's music and podcasts are podcasts. They're two very different mediums with different goals, right? Music is trying to evoke an emotional response, whereas podcasting in a lot of ways is evoking an intellectual response,
Not when I'm talking.
Yeah, or me, Jake. Let me tell you, buddy. But I kind of have to recant a little bit on that now that I'm thinking about it, because just as charisma and subject matter are both very important factors in a podcast, I'd say intellectual and emotional stimulation make for a great podcast and for great music, which is why Tool is one of my all-time favorite bands.
It was established off mic. Tool is your Bob Dylan.
Tool is my Bob Dylan. Lateralis is pretty much the apex of music, in my opinion.
So turning to music, you are doing a lot of live music stuff now these days.
Love doing live sound. I really love it.
Tell me more.
That's all there is to say about that, Jake. Yeah, I love doing live sound. It's a thing I didn't really expect my personal time investment to switch over to, but I spend so much time doing it these days, and it's like, okay, this takes away from me working in my studio, because I have to be very selective about the time that I spend these days, because it's like when I'm doing this thing over here, I can't do this thing over here. So I could take on less live sound projects. I don't want to. I like doing it. I really enjoy it because there's instant feedback. When you're recording in the studio environment, you'll send your client off with their recordings, and sometimes you'll never hear from these people again. You just never. I don't even know when the music gets released. It's because I'm just this like one-time service that they utilized. Even if we get along, and even if I felt like we become friends, it to a lot of musicians, it's just not important for them to get back to me and let me know that, oh, I released this music. Okay, so a lot of times I don't get feedback. Right, wrong, good, bad, whatever, no feedback. But in the live environment, I get instant feedback. I can see when the band can hear themselves well, which is really important when they're trying to do a live performance. I can see when the crowd is enjoying themselves because they're out there dancing and having a great time. And that instant feedback is very gratifying. There's really something to that. On top of that, a lot of the work done in the studio, you're by yourself. You're just sitting there by yourself in your man cave making sounds like, hope I'm doing a good job here. But when I'm out running live sound, I'm hanging out with these bands and I'm hanging out with the crowd, and I'm dancing and having a good time. It's like a totally different vibe. I love this vibe. I'm like really having a great time. So in general, my career in music, it started off as I wanted to make records. But what I realized over time is I actually just want to feel good and be independent and do what I want. And you know what? That makes me feel good. And I'm doing what I want. I have my independence. So I like it. So I'm doing it. Now, it's taken away from my studio work. It has. I do so much less work here in the studio since I started doing that. And which is why I need to start growing my staff here, because when I'm gone, this place just sits empty. So I really need to find some reliable engineering staff, which is difficult. Finding reliable help is very difficult, but I'll pay them well.
Oh, are you looking for staff, Brian? I did not know.
Hey, Jake, did you know that I am looking for engineers here at Altman Studios? That was not the reason for getting this podcast going today, but I'll tell you what, it is really important. I want to find reliable engineers here. I'll take good care of you. I will train you myself on everything that I know, and you'll have a key to the studio, and you'll have personal, after a 90-day vetting period, you will have personal free use of this studio as availability permits. All I ask is that you have high integrity, a great attitude, and be able to come to the studio in Brentwood regularly.
This just loops back into the mentorship and the, self-taught and all these other things we've been talking about. So I think it's a great thing to point out. One thing I haven't asked you, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here because I didn't put it on our list of questions. You've been playing guitar since you were 14. You wanted to make records. Are there any Brian records out there that people can actually listen to?
I'm embarrassed to say that there are not, actually. I have a lot of unreleased music. And my biggest struggle, and it will be released at some point, and that's so cliche to say, but it will be released. My struggle has always been that I just don't want to do it by myself. I could write all the drums and all the everything and record everything myself, but it's just not the same doing it by yourself. I want someone else to bring something to the table that I don't expect, that surprises me. And finding the right membership for the songs, the projects that I want to write and create. One, I haven't put a ton of effort into it, but two, I obviously haven't found these people when I do put the effort in. So at some point, and hopefully soon, I'm especially these days as I'm starting to, I went through like a dry spell creatively, and now I've got this creative spark that's starting to come back. I'm writing again. I'm excited about revisiting some of my old recordings and
zhuzhing them up a little.
Zhuzhing them up, yeah, as the Jake would say. And I've developed new skills. My skills as a producer and as a mix engineer have improved dramatically. If I would have tried to release some of this stuff years ago, it wouldn't be at the level of quality it would be today. So, like I said, I think I said something like this at the beginning. I don't want to just release music. I want to release amazing music. And if it doesn't reach that level of quality for me, it's not ready to go out. And I don't care if that makes me look goofy, like, okay, I've been doing this for a long time. It's been my goal. I never released anything. Well, you know what? Because it's not there yet. And I want it when it's there, I will release it. And it is great. I'll tell you that much.
I think it's great. I think we'll all look forward to listening to it. Before we bring it home, Brian, is there anything else you feel you want to talk about that we haven't touched on?
I just want to say a huge thank you to the press, to you, Jake, and to the rest of the staff, and to Greg for allowing me to integrate with your business so deeply. I've really enjoyed creating this work, and I also want to give a big thank you to the Brentwood community. I didn't come here seeking this community. I didn't come here expecting anything like what I've experienced since I've come here. I feel like a part of this community, and I just got here, and I couldn't be more grateful. I never want to leave now. I love being here. I love Brentwood. I love the people here. I love the businesses here, and I'm here to stay. I'm very excited about what we can do to make Brentwood a better place.
What a note to end it on. That's it for today's episode of Clocked In with the Press, my friends. It's another one in the books. We appreciate you taking the time to listen in, and we look forward to speaking with you in future episodes. I want to thank my friend Brian Altman for jumping on a mic for a change and joining me this week.
Well, thank you again, Jake, for having me here. It is fun to be on this side of the mic, and of course, doing this with you, my good friend, has been very nice.
And listeners, once again, we'd like to thank you. If you'd like to read more stories about East Contra Costa County, you can do so on our website at www.thepress.net or through our Twitter and Instagram at PressClockedIn. Be sure to tune in this Friday for your local news and sports highlights. As always, you can contact us with your thoughts on this episode or any others by emailing podcasts@brentwoodpress.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon. This is Jake.
And Brian.
Clocking out.
When it comes to the home of your dreams, a trusted realtor can help with every step of your home buying journey. The Lucas Group is committed to excellence and personal service in all their sales. Their award-winning team is dedicated to putting their clients' needs first and consists of some of the top local agents. The Lucas Group has partnered with HomeLight Inc. and is now an elite certified agent partner for simple sales, trade-ins, and cash offers. Call the Lucas Group at 925-392-8926.